Our next guest is a global visionary whose motto is technology for the sake of humanity. His organization is called Not Impossible. And he's taking the impossible and making it possible by providing desperately needed medical solutions to people all over the world. Not Impossible's goal to come up with low-cost and do-it-yourself solutions and make them available on an open-source platform. The result? Much-needed high-tech devices are able to reach and help those in need no matter how remote their location. Just listen to a few of the things they've created. An EyeWriter to enable a completely paralyzed man to draw with the blink of an eye. They recently set out to help a Sudanese refugee named Daniel regain the limbs he tragically lost to war.
Daniel was 14 when the bomb took his arms. I read the article about him and had to help. I came to Sudan with 3D printers, laptops, spools of plastic, and the goal to build Daniel an arm. And then Daniel fed himself for the first time in 2 years.
Big smile there. The idea is simple. Help one, help many, and they've done exactly that. Now villagers in South Sudan can continue to aid other victims at the world's first 3D prosthetic lab and training facility. It's worth noting that in the time since that video of Daniel was shot, an arm a week has been printed by the local trainees at that facility in Africa. Here to tell us more about all things Not Impossible is the organization's co-founder, Elliot Kotek. Welcome to the broadcast. Elliot, tell us who we saw in that video, because he's a big guy and he's also your buddy.
That's right. So Mick Ebling and I, Mick founded Not Impossible with the EyeWriter project, and then we teamed up, me as the co-founder and content chief, to take on Project Daniel. So Mick is an awesome guy. He's 6'6". I call him the action figure. He really is a larger-than-life character. I'm not a small guy, so for him to be able to make me look kind of dwarfish is pretty cool. But yeah, he's got a ton of energy and wants to just continue doing this stuff. So we kind of teamed up in order to tackle this project and now a dozen others that we've got on our slate.
Yeah, we're going to get to a lot of this, but take us back in time. You're living in Venice. You have a mutual acquaintance. You guys get to know each other. So tell me how all of this comes together.
Yeah, so Mick had done the EyeWriter and was looking to reinvest in something that he thought was going to further his ambition in terms of changing someone's life and bringing some sort of new technology to a place that wouldn't expect it or doesn't anticipate it. And basically our whole platform together, when we started talking about it, was creating access for people. So people who are either limited geographically, financially, or physically, what can we do, what stories can we tell, where we get to introduce them to some solution that will help change their lives immeasurably. And if we can tell their story well, can we inspire others to either take on that same technology or at least just be inspired by the notion that two people or a person without any medical training can go out and actually have an impact, actually have an effect on someone else's life.
Here's a guy, which this doesn't come across in the video we just saw, who really doesn't even know what he's doing. I mean, let's be honest, he didn't know how to do this stuff. He spends like 6 days training. Walk us through this. And some people, I think, would say this is impossible, and yet he spent the time, he learned the technique.
That's exactly it. The deal is so much bigger than the two of us. It's all about the volunteers, the makers, the people who know how to do these things, bringing them together into a room working out what these solutions are, working out a way to make them cost effective. In this case, it was teaming up with a guy, Richard van Aars, a South African guy who had actually chopped off his own fingers and come up with a workable solution using his 3D printer to print himself a hand, which he called the Robo Hand. And when we decided to do Project Daniel, we brought him out from South Africa. We brought a team of other makers down from San Francisco and a 3D printer company owner named Brooke Drum, who has a company called Printerbot. We brought him down to LA, and we all got together in this house for a weekend trying to work out something that would work for Daniel. And Daniel was kind of hypothetical at the time. We'd read the story about him, we knew he existed, but we didn't know if we'd be able to actually help Daniel. We would just wanted to help someone like Daniel. And during a phone call that day with the doctor who runs the hospital in the Nuba Mountains, he told us during that weekend that they'd located Daniel in this refugee camp.
What's the feeling when you hear that news?
We were dumbstruck. You now have a project that's already called Project Daniel that we were hoping to just pass on to somebody else, and here you had the actual person, and it just made everything so much more real. And yeah, like you said, when Mick left, and it was just a team of 4 people that got to go because you wanted to keep it to less than a carload. So when Mick left, he didn't know how to build one of those arms. And he spent 6 days with Yoda, with our mentor, with Mr. Miyagi, in South Africa, helping teach him how to build this arm, and practice for 6 days before going up to Sudan.
Well, so like when I think of do-it-yourself projects, I think of me going to the hardware store and like 5 extra bolts and the thing doesn't work right. And then you're talking about high-tech devices. I mean, it seems like an oxymoron. How do you put those two together?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing, is that sometimes it is taking the highest of new technologies like 3D printing and taking it to a place that has never expected it, never even known about the technology, and showing how easy and intuitive it is for them to use it and potentially even design their own solutions from it. Other times it's about repurposing something that you and I take for granted that maybe is really old technology. So for us, building the arm was actually pretty low tech in terms of its application. It's a mechanical arm with one single function, which is just opening and closing, but it's built using the latest in tech. So for us, the solutions are such that if you've got the mind to do it, you can do it.
But when you watch Daniel and he's feeding himself for the first time and you see this enormous smile, you think, just watching that, you think, okay, you say it's low tech, but to me it looks high tech. Yeah. It looks like it's expensive, but it's not. How do you keep the cost down, and how important is that? And then the other part of this, which we talked about, you're leaving at some point, or Mick's leaving at some point, coming back to Venice Beach.
Yeah.
But you want others to benefit from this, and that teaching aspect of this.
We have different degrees of success associated with each of our projects. If we had just been able to build an arm that Daniel likes and was going to use to feed himself, that was already a win. Then if we could teach others in that community how to use these machines using a laptop to print a hand from a 3D printed file, then that would be considered a win. And these guys, a lot of them have never had their own computers before. They've used a community desktop or things like that, but certainly not a fancy touch laptop like we had there. They certainly didn't know about 3D printing. And they've got the equivalent of an education of, say, maybe 4th grade or 6th grade. And it was really important to try and teach these guys and see whether it was indeed possible for them to pick up this technology within the space of just a few days. And the fact that they could and have then replicated it. They had a short hiccup when civil war broke out again in South Sudan. Bombing continued from the north. In fact, the hospital was bombed as well back in May. And so they had a short hiatus, but the fact that they then got back on with it and started printing again was huge. And it shows that if you can do it in a solar-powered hospital in the middle of a war zone with a one-doctor place that's servicing about 1 million people, then you can pretty much do it anywhere.
You're talking about a word giving, but you're not talking about a word that we hear a lot in our society, profits. I would think that some of the folks who are making these sorts of devices and charging lots and lots of money probably aren't crazy about this idea. I mean, a lot of us are like, this is fantastic, but I'm sure they're sitting there going, this isn't so good.
Yeah.
Have you gotten blowback, any kind of?
No, at the moment we've gone to, well, the iRider was here in LA, but it was also to someone who didn't have the health insurance that he needed to get devices that he needed, didn't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars that he would have needed to get something equivalent to the iRider. With Project Daniel, it's still going to developing countries and giving them something that's pretty simple. In our own country, we have like really expensive robotic devices that do cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a time. And then you have these other solutions that could, insurance might give you one arm. But if you're a kid growing up, you're going to need another arm every other year as your bones grow. And so we need the insurance system to keep up with that, or to enable these other solutions to be kind of temporary solutions. People from the military who come back without limbs, who need something just in the interim before they get their fancy robotic, or something to use in the shower, because you can't take a robotic in the shower because you're going to stuff it up. But, so you're going to have these other tools. And like you said, like we cut the cost down on this to under $100 per arm. And the cheapest equivalent in terms of like a fiberglass set hook is still about $3,000 to $5,000.
What do you find more amazing? Is it amazing sitting in a room with all these great minds coming up with these solutions? Or is it amazing taking the step along that path and actually seeing something like this in action, and seeing the smiles or seeing these reactions from the people who benefit?
It's kind of the extension of that. It's like technology for the sake of humanity, right? There's plenty of tech going on right now where it's what's being built that's bigger, faster, smaller, more speedy, whatever it is. But being able to look at that and say, well, okay, cool, this is all amazing, and all this experimentation and gaming is incredible. How can we capture this and make sure that we use it not just for entertainment, even though that's cool, let's use it to help people and give them back some of those points of access that they're lacking. And then the best part is, once you've even given that solution to someone, having someone else call you from some country on the other side of the planet saying, we followed the instructables, or we downloaded the files, or we went and spoke to our makers in our local community and they made something for someone. We got a call from Brazil of some guys who made an arm for someone in Brazil using the files, and they kind of researched and found them themselves, but they didn't know that they had the ability to do it until they saw the video. We've got a 6-year-old girl in Vietnam who is a quadruple amputee who watched Project Daniel video, who now knows what's possible, and there are solutions possible for her as she grows up. And that is just, that's magic. That's really magic.
Well, the best part of my job is I get to talk to people like you. Thanks so much for coming in.
No, I appreciate it. It's been awesome.
That's great.